Hi, everybody. We are going to do the introduction to the connecting principles today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't had a chance to join the New Mexico Fiesta Facebook page or the Project Revive Facebook page, please go ahead and do that. Those pages are great resources for you, sources of support and encouragement, and we really want New Mexico adoptive and foster families to have a built-in community there. So please take a second to join those groups. If you're really interested in TBRI and you want to learn more about that, you can also join the La Familia TBRI Participants Facebook page. That's a group specifically talking about TBRI, trust-based relational interventions, and how we work that into our parenting strategies. So again, today we're going to talk about connecting principles. This is just the introduction to connecting principles, so there will be more webinars coming that will go more in depth on those, but these are to give us a quick overview of the mindfulness strategies and the engagement strategies. So the first strategy that we look at in connecting principles is the mindfulness strategies. And I love this because not many parenting strategies ask us to look at our past and look at how we were parented and the experiences we've had and how that impacts the way that we parent our kids. And so the really important piece about this is that the connecting principles are really designed to strengthen and deepen our relationship connections between caregivers and the kids that they serve. And when kids come from difficult backgrounds, they have almost always, I would say 99.9% of the time, experienced relationship-based traumas. And they need help learning to trust and connect with the people that are taking care of them. And so the mindfulness strategies are really designed to encourage parents to examine their own relationship histories and how those histories influence what they bring to the relationships with the kids that they're caring for. So being present in each moment with kids is important. And that can really only happen when caregivers have processed their own stories. So we ask our kids all the time to do the hard work to heal from their traumas. And we can't walk them down that path unless we've already gone there. So it's super, super important. I know people often feel like the home study process is invasive and they feel that people are getting in their business and that kind of thing, but there's a reason behind that. There's a reason that we look at our past. There's a reason that we encourage you to look at your past. When I did my TBRI training in Texas, part of that process was to do an adult attachment inventory. And it was amazing. So I would encourage anybody out there to do an adult attachment inventory if you can. There's several online that are very short. They're not therapeutic in any way, but they might give you an idea about what kind of attachment you have and what you need to do to work towards earned secure attachment. It's really very, very important, and I can't oversell how vital it is that as parents we look at our past and that we're willing to do the hard work to get us to secure attachment so that we can be the parents that our kids need. The next piece is engagement strategies, and these provide parents with the practical tools for relating to kids in meaningful ways. And we're going to go deeper into those in the next modules, but to really understand and appreciate how scary it is for kids who have been hurt to start to trust safe adults that are taking care of them. It's really important that we understand the attachment cycle fully. This module concentrates a lot on the attachment cycle as a basis for TBRI connecting principles. And it's really kind of an interesting piece because oftentimes families who've adopted, families that have done fostering, caseworkers, we all feel like we understand the attachment cycle, but Dr. Purvis does an amazing job of explaining it in a very different way. And so I would really encourage you to not check out, not zone out, and pay attention and see how this impacts your interactions with kids.
For several decades now, we've understood something that's been called by researchers and psychologists and clinicians the attachment cycle. We've taken that cycle and elaborated it, and it has become a pathway not only to what should have happened if a child had been in a loving home, but it also helps us have a map to guide us. What does that child need now at 8 or 10 or 17 in order to heal? Because if a child did not get these needs met early in their life and consistently in their life, they will still need the same things no matter what their age is. Now, the attachment cycle, as it was originally conceived several decades ago, consisted of a child having a need. We would call that voice. The need would be expressed. The infant might cry, they might whimper, the parent might understand their sounds of distress. So need would be expressed. The child might be hungry, cold, wet, lonely, tired, afraid. And for whatever reason they were distressed when they cried, they were physically and emotionally distraught. If they're in an environment where there's a caregiver who's able to come quickly and consistently, the need would be met. And it would be consistently met. Now, for many children, this is not possible. Possibly mother has a postpartum depression. Possibly there's a parent with a drug abuse issue. Possibly it's a parent doing too many jobs and the child is in a low-quality daycare and no one comes to the cry. Possibly it's a neglectful or even an abusive environment. But for whatever reason, this child's needs are met or unmet, we begin to set a pattern for life. If this child is in a proper environment that's able to meet their needs, the baby cries, expresses their need, the need is met immediately by a consistent, loving, nurturing caregiver. And so the child is distressed, and then the child is calmed. This happens 100,000 times in the first year of life. The baby cries, the parent comes. The baby cries, the parent comes. The baby cries, the parent comes. This child sets up an expectation that they will be loved and that they will be cared for. And out of this cycle comes the behaviors that we call attachment behaviors. Attachment behaviors include trust. These adults will meet my needs. Out of this comes a sense of self-worth. This child looks into the eyes of the caregiver and knows that they are precious. And a sense of what we would call self-efficacy, or again, we would call voice. I cry, somebody shows up. Life is good. So if this happens over and over again, we get to say to this child that's developing an environment that is loving and nurturing, yes, I will meet your needs. I would look at a second layer. When the baby cries and the need is met, something called the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, is activated. That simply means they're stressed. And this stress is significant. Matter of fact, we know that the stress system gets set prenatally and even the first year of life. If there's a stressful pregnancy and the child is experiencing the mother's neurochemical stress, and if their first year, this HPA axis gets set on hot. It's like the speed of a car and the pedal is pressed down. But in the optimal environment, when this is activated, the stress system is activated, one part kicks in called the sympathetic nervous system. And so this sympathetic nervous system, the baby heart rate increases, the blood pressure increases, they're crying louder and louder, and their little face is red with anguish by the time a caregiver arrives. But when that need is met, the voice is heard. This child knows someone will come. Then what we call the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. And the parasympathetic brings down all of the chemicals of stress. It brings down all the chemicals of fear. It brings down all the chemicals of harm. So what we have in essence is activation of two biological systems that make up the HPA axis. I get upset, but you calm me. I get cold, but you warm me. I get afraid, but you comfort me. And this happens over and over and over again. And the systems that are biologically induced and operated in this child become set on the capacity for self-regulation. So the HPA axis brings us the foundation for self-regulation. Unfortunately, most of the children who come to us and most of the children that we serve are dysregulated. They may over-respond, overreact, be too upset about everything. A small no can bring an earthquake or a major eruption in the household because of this overactivation here. And on the third layer would be called something neurotransmitters. They're simply the chemicals in your body. If you're depressed, you probably don't have enough dopamine or serotonin. If you don't have energy, you may not have enough adrenaline. They're simply the stuff that the human body, emotions, feeling, thinking, and doing are generated by. And if I look at a child who's in a distress cycle and I look at neurotransmitters, on this side I'm going to see a classification of neurotransmitters called excitatory. That means they race my heart, they bring up my blood pressure, they make me feel anxious, they could give me energy to escape from danger. That's why you have excitatory neurotransmission when you're in a crisis. But if this child is in a loving home, that need is met quickly. And now there's the release of what we call inhibitory neurotransmitters. So again, think about the pattern. The brain is developing a pattern for activation that will be set for the lifespan. I get upset, my neurotransmitters go high, but I get calm, and the calming neurotransmitters like serotonin and GABA calm me. I get upset, I get calmed. I get upset, I get calmed. This becomes the foundation of mental health. For a child who has a balance, I use my voice, I cry, someone comes. This child will have attachment behaviors of trust, self-worth, self-efficacy. They'll have the capacity for self-regulation. And they'll also have the foundation for later mental health, what we will call mental health in our society. Now, for the children that I serve, too often, need was not met. These are children who cried and no one came. These are children who may have cried for the harm to stop and the predator took joy in their cries. These are children who have lost their voice. These are children, as they lost their voice, they began to believe, I can't trust others and connect to them. I can't believe that I have any value. And it doesn't matter what I ask for, nobody cares. These are children whose brains would have mentored their brain. We understand from science there's something called mirror neurons. And when a parent is active in caring for the child, it activates those same brain regions. So that child would have had a parent mentoring their brain, and their brain would have begun to develop those same capacities. But a child from a hard place won't have the capacity for self-regulation. And neither will they have the foundation neurochemically for mental health. These are children who the very smallest bump in the road becomes an enormous challenge. Now, if I look at that cycle, and I look at what happened to those children, if need is not met, I don't get any of the attachment behaviors or the regulatory behaviors, nor do I get the capacity for mental health. It's not that they want to look like that or act like that. They don't have capacity because it wasn't provided by a nurturing adult. As I think about this, I lose all of this side of the cycle. And now this child is a runaway train. He's in chronic distress, and distress takes over. His sympathetic nervous system fires at the drop of a hat, and his excitatory neurons are stuck on go.
Every time I watch that video, I honestly feel like we need to have like a moment of silence after that video is over. It is so incredibly powerful to think about the impact that we make every single time we meet our kids' needs. That's part of why at the end of the last session, I asked you to think about how can you say yes to the child in your home? How can you figure out a way to meet their needs, even if the need feels like a want to you? If you can figure out a way to meet your child's needs, that is going to be priceless in developing connection with them. I love the piece in this video where Dr. Purvis talks about the fact that the brain and the body come together to create a pattern of distress and then calm, and then distress and then calm when that child's brain is being nurtured by a loving, caring adult. And so that is our role. That is the place that we can intervene. When our kids have a need, whether they're 3 months old or 6 years old or 16 and a half years old, if they have a need and we can meet that need, we have to do that. They have to know that we will do that consistently and caringly. And they have to get that we are that person for them. And when their needs are met like that, when a consistent caring adult meets their needs, then kids learn that they have a voice and that they can use their voice to ask for what they need, and they don't have to react in the behaviors that we see. And so it's so important that we really understand that early environment that many, many of our kids have been in, whether that was prenatally or in the first years of life when they weren't in our homes, or maybe even early in life when they were in our homes and we didn't know that we needed to be doing this. When the early environment doesn't foster that I have a need, a healthy adult meets my need, the foundation for secure attachment and regulation and mental health is disrupted. But again, this is where we can make a difference. Kids learn that asking for what they need is of no use if nobody meets their needs. They have no voice. And then they act out in survival behaviors like aggression and manipulation and control, because that's the only way that they know to get their needs met and survive. So with TBRI, we're really going to focus on being able to replace those survival strategies by giving voice in place of those negative behaviors. So the next video clip that we're going to watch is the attachment cycle. What are the next steps? And actually, before we watch that, I want to go back to this last slide. One of my favorite trainers at TCU, Darren Jones, talks about no matter what age our child is, no matter how old they are and how they're behaving, we need to see them as the infant that didn't get their needs met. So we need to think about, with this behavior that I'm seeing, what might an infant who didn't get a need met, how might they act that way? So if your child is doing something, think about them as an infant. One of the tools that I've encouraged families to use for years is to find infant pictures of their child. When they were really little, maybe silly pictures, maybe goofy pictures, maybe sad pictures if that's all you have. If you don't have access to baby pictures of your child, there are websites online that can do age regression instead of age progression. So they can take a picture of your child now and create what your child might have looked like as an infant. And those can be incredibly powerful for parents as a tool to go back and think about, what did my baby miss and how can I fill that in for them? So please think about that as you move forward. This next video, the attachment cycle next steps, is additionally, that last video is probably my favorite video of all time. But this one is really, really powerful as well. So take a minute and look at that.
Now, I want to draw for you very briefly how we would bring this child back online. So if you think about the outline that we made based on development, think about attachment. So what am I going to do for attachment? Most important critical feature, okay? I'm going to do a lot of the things that would have helped develop trust. One of the first things that I'm going to do, just like I said, yes, I hear your voice, I will meet your need, I'm going to find ways to say yes. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to set up situations so that I can say yes in order to earn trust. It's obviously a little harder the older the children are, but we can always gain their trust by saying yes to a need. Now, some parents will say, well, it's really just a want. Well, you know, sometimes a want can be a need, and a need that's met can be a powerful bridge to trust. I'm going to give that child a sense of self-worth. I'm going to look into their eyes deeply when I talk to them. I'm going to touch their shoulder gently or touch near their shoulder if they seem to pull back from my touch. I'm going to tell them, like the little one, I would have said, you're so precious. I'm so amazed at how precious you are. To a big kid, I might say, hey, you're a great kid. I love to be with you. You're just a great kid. But I'm going to let them know that I know they're amazing, that there's no one in the world like them. Sometimes we even stand in front of the mirror with kids or pick up a little handheld mirror and say, look at this kid. Is that not the most amazing kid you've ever seen? I'm going to also give them a sense of self-efficacy. When I can, I'm going to let them make compromises with me. I'm going to give them choices, and I'm going to be as responsive to their needs as I possibly can. I'm going to have to work at these things, but I can take a child of any age and give them this and put them back on the trajectory that they should have had they been in a loving environment. Now, behavioral self-regulation, I am going to actually teach regulatory skills. We're going to teach the children deep breathing and relaxation. We're going to teach them how to hold the pressure point so they can calm themselves, or a pressure point here so they can calm themselves. There are dozens and dozens of capacities. And then mental health. I'm going to help this child understand, because many of them feel bad and feel crazy. And I'm going to let them understand, help them understand that I understand how they feel, and that we can work together to regulate, and that this feeling of badness will go away. This feeling, many of them will say, my head is spinning, or I feel crazy. I feel sad, I feel scared. We can also do things to regulate the brain chemistry, like increase the serotonin-rich foods and give them physical activity. Simply playing 20 to 30 minutes, a nice physical play, maybe outside, maybe on the inside, trampoline, a sit and spin, any kind of repetitive activity is going to drive up serotonin and bring down all the excitatory stuff that's too tough and too high on our kids. I've used this intervention that we have called trust-based relational intervention that meets the needs of body, soul, and spirit with children all over the world. I have yet to see a child, even the most difficult, even the toughest kids, I have yet to see a child whose real precious self didn't emerge. And I have yet to see a child who does not come to dramatic levels of healing.
Love that video too. She gives us some really great ideas. So just to wrap up, we're going to move on to the empowering principles in the next session. But just to wrap up the introduction to the connecting principles, I want you to remember that there are going to be probably 2 more episodes that we'll do that go in depth on the connecting principles. But in this session, we learned that the connecting principles are really the foundation of TBRI. They're designed to provide parents with the knowledge and tools to relate on a deep level. This isn't surface stuff. This is really deep connection with other humans, and it is hard work. We learned that during the first years of life, the attachment cycle sets the stage for mental health for kids, that when it's interrupted, And disrupted significant changes in the brain lead to behavioral and emotional difficulties in kids. It is a profound change that happens when kids don't get the connection they need early in life. And then we learned that the brain is plastic, and that is the exciting part. It is exciting to know that we can make a difference for our kids, that with intentional nurturing caregiving, we can make a difference and help bring our kids back online and get them back on the developmental trajectory that they need to be to become who they were meant to be. The other important piece, like we talked about in the first session, is that when kids lose their voice by not having their attachment needs met, it really becomes almost impossible to trust adults to meet their needs. So they resort to survival techniques like manipulation and violence and aggression. And so we have to focus on connection, because that's what returns voice to our kids. Meeting their needs consistently is what brings trust and healing to our kids. So thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Again, in the next week or so, we'll be putting out the introduction to empowering principles, the physiological strategies and ecological strategies. Please take a minute to do the evaluation online, and we are happy that you're joining us on this journey. Please give us some information about whether having these trainings online is helpful for you. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope again that you take some time to join the Facebook pages, both New Mexico Fiesta and Project Revive. Thank you and have a great day.